So, how do you win a war by refusing to win it? That's the question we're diving into today. We're breaking down Iran's doctrine of deterrence from the 2026 conflict, a strategy that's not about victory, but about making the cost of fighting just too high for any enemy to pay.
All right, here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at how the conflict got started. Then we'll get into the weeds on Iran's core strategy. After that, we'll unpack the military, economic, and even social tools they use, all of which leads to a totally different way of thinking about what victory actually means.
Okay, first things first. To really get what Iran was doing in 2026, you have to look at the chain of events that, from their perspective, was an imposed war. Basically, a fight they believe was pushed on them.
So when you look at this timeline, you can see a pretty clear pattern of things ramping up. It really starts with the US pulling out of the JCPOA. That's the big Iran nuclear deal back in 2018. From there, you see assassinations, and then direct military strikes in 2025. For Tehran, each one of these moments felt like another step toward a war that was basically inevitable.
So you're facing what you see as this massive existential threat. What do? Well, Iran's central philosophy isn't about some classic conventional victory on the battlefield. It's about something else entirely.
And this, right here, is the core of it. The goal is totally flipped on its head. It's not about winning, it's about denying the other guy a win. The whole idea is to make the war so expensive, so long, and so politically messy that your opponent just gives up and goes home.
This quote just nails it. The ultimate objective is regime survival. That's it. Every single move they make is designed to jack up the price for their adversaries, hoping that eventually that price becomes way too high to pay.
Okay, so how does Iran actually pull this off against forces with way more advanced and expensive technology? Well, it all comes down to a few key, let's call them asymmetric advantages. The first big piece of the puzzle is its giant arsenal of ballistic missiles. We're talking about weapons like the Khorramshahr and the Fateh-2, which can travel up to 2,000 kilometers. That's far enough to hit targets pretty much anywhere in the region. Now here's the really clever part. It's all a numbers game. These missiles are cheap to build, so you can make a lot of them. You then launch hundreds at once in these huge waves. The whole point is to overwhelm incredibly expensive air defense systems like Iron Dome or Patriot. You're forcing them to fire multi-million-dollar interceptors to stop your relatively cheap missiles. In a long war, you can literally make them run out of ammo. But, having all these missiles doesn't mean much if they get blown up on the ground before you can even launch them. And that brings us to the next part of their military strategy, making sure their weapons can survive.
They've built this massive network of bunkers, buried super deep under mountains. The idea is that they are basically immune to a first strike. This creates what's called a second strike capability. It's a promise that no matter how hard you hit them first, they will always have the ability to hit back hard.
And then, to top it all off, you've got thousands of low-cost drones. They're launched in swarms, not to deliver one killer blow, but to just be a constant grinding nuisance. They saturate defenses, hit supply lines, and slowly, piece by piece, wear down an enemy's ability and will to keep fighting.
But this whole strategy of attrition isn't just about missiles and drones. It gets bigger. It bleeds right into the global economy, using geography itself as a massive weapon.
And the key to that whole economic weapon, it all comes down to one place, the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway that Iran's coastline just happens to dominate.
Now this is why it's such a powerful tool. Think about that. About 1/5 of all the oil the entire world uses sails right through this tiny little channel every single day. That's a huge global vulnerability.
So by just threatening this corridor with things like sea mines or anti-ship missiles, Iran can pretty much guarantee that a local fight becomes a global economic crisis. I mean, during the 2026 conflict, just the threat alone helped cause an 11% spike in oil prices worldwide. That creates a whole lot of instability and pressure far, far away from the actual battlefield.
All right, so the last piece of this doctrine isn't a weapons system. It's not a missile or a ship. It's the Iranian population itself, rallied around this powerful story of national defense.
What's really fascinating is what happened inside Iran during the conflict. According to analyses, all that external military pressure actually had this weird unifying effect. The story of a nation under attack seemed to quiet down internal dissent and rally people around a kind of defiant nationalism.
And from the Iranian leadership's point of view, this basically took the idea of an internal uprising completely off the table. It created, in their eyes, a united front, which is absolutely essential if you're going to survive a long, brutal war of attrition.
And when you look at the numbers here, you start to see their long-term logic. You've got 93 million people supposedly united for the cause against a much smaller and, at the time, deeply divided opponent. In a long, grinding war of endurance, they see that as a huge strategic advantage.
Okay, so let's put it all together. You've got the asymmetric military tools, the economic leverage point, and the mobilized population. What does it all add up to? Well, it tells us that the very definition of victory has been completely flipped on its head.
The entire strategy really comes down to these three things. First, deny the enemy an easy win. Make it a bloody, expensive mess. Second, impose costs that go way beyond the battlefield and hit the whole world. And finally, just endure. Outlast them. For them, the survival of the political system is the victory.
And that leaves us with this really tough question, doesn't it? In this kind of war, where the main goal is simply not to lose, what does winning even look like? If nobody is trying to conquer territory, and the objective is just to make the other side quit, how does a war like that ever truly end?